The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at RAF Northolt as the sleek royal aircraft prepared for departure. Prince William stood at the terminal window, his jaw set in a firm line as he watched the ground crew perform their final checks. Today's flight to Edinburgh was supposed to be routine, but nothing about this trip felt ordinary. The weight of recent family tensions hung heavy in the air, and William knew that the next few hours would test every protocol the royal household had carefully constructed over decades. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, approached quietly from behind, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She placed a gentle hand on her husband's shoulder, feeling the tension radiating through his frame. "The children are settled in the car," she said softly, glancing toward the black Range Rover where Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis waited with their nanny. "Are you certain about this approach?" William turned to face his wife, his blue eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and concern. "There's no other way, Catherine. The situation has escalated beyond what we can manage through normal channels. Sometimes decisive action is the only language that gets through." He paused, watching as several black vehicles pulled up to the aircraft. "The security briefing this morning confirmed our concerns. We can't afford any more incidents." The previous week had been a whirlwind of closed-door meetings, urgent phone calls, and carefully worded statements that said nothing while implying everything. The royal family's inner circle had been buzzing with whispered conversations about protocol breaches, security concerns, and what palace insiders were calling unprecedented challenges to established procedures. William had found himself at the center of these discussions, his role as heir to the throne requiring him to make decisions that would have far-reaching consequences. Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison, the lead protection officer for the Cambridge family, approached with a clipboard in hand and a serious expression. A veteran of 15 years with the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Protection Unit, Morrison had seen her share of complex security situations, but something about today felt different. "Your Royal Highness," she said with a respectful nod, "the aircraft has been cleared, and all security measures are in place. However, I must inform you that we've received some last-minute intelligence that requires your attention." William's eyebrows raised slightly as he accepted the encrypted tablet Morrison handed him. The information displayed on the screen made him pause, his expression growing more grave with each line he read. "When did this come in?" he asked, his voice steady despite the concerning nature of the intelligence. 20 minutes ago, sir," Morrison replied. "Our contacts at MI5 flagged some unusual communications that suggest today's flight may face some unexpected complications. Nothing that poses a direct security threat, but certainly something that could escalate into a situation requiring immediate response." Catherine leaned closer, though she couldn't see the screen's contents. Years of royal life had taught her to read her husband's expressions with precision, and she could see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed this new information. "How serious is it?" she asked quietly. "Serious enough that we need to adjust our approach," William replied, handing the tablet back to Morrison. "Inspector, I want you to implement Protocol 7 the moment we're airborne. Brief the entire security team and make sure they understand that any deviation from standard procedure needs to be reported immediately to me personally." Protocol 7 was rarely invoked, reserved for situations where the royal family's safety or dignity faced potential compromise from sources that couldn't be addressed through normal diplomatic channels. It granted the heir apparent extraordinary authority to direct security operations in real time, bypassing the usual chain of command when circumstances demanded swift action. As the family boarded the aircraft, the atmosphere was noticeably tense. The usual pre-flight routine of settling into the comfortable leather seats and reviewing the day's schedule was replaced by quiet conversations between security personnel and multiple phone calls to various government departments. Prince George, now old enough to sense when something was amiss, looked up from his book to study his father's face. "Dad, is everything all right?" the young prince asked, his voice carrying the careful pronunciation that came from years of royal tutoring. William smiled at his eldest son, though the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything's fine, George. We're just making sure all the proper arrangements are in place for our arrival in Scotland." He ruffled his son's hair affectionately, a gesture that helped mask his own concerns about what lay ahead. The aircraft's captain, Squadron Leader James Mitchell, emerged from the cockpit to personally brief the royal family on the flight plan. A decorated RAF officer with over 20 years of experience flying royal missions, Mitchell had developed an intuitive sense for when a routine flight might become something more complicated. "Your Royal Highness," he addressed William, "we have a clear flight path to Edinburgh, estimated flight time of 1 hour and 45 minutes. However, I've been informed that there may be some irregular radio traffic during our journey." "What kind of irregular traffic?" Catherine asked, her maternal instincts sharpening at any mention of potential complications during a flight with her children. Mitchell glanced at William, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of permission. "Nothing that affects flight safety, Your Royal Highness. But there have been reports of unauthorized attempts to contact royal aircraft through non-standard channels. Protocol requires us to monitor and document any such attempts." As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, William pulled out his secure phone and placed a call to his private secretary at Kensington Palace. "James, it's William. I need you to coordinate with the Scottish office and make sure they're prepared for any media inquiries about today's visit. Keep the responses standard for now, but be ready to escalate to the press office if necessary." He paused, listening to the response before continuing. "Yes, that's correct. And James, make sure the Lord Chamberlain's office is kept informed of any developments." The takeoff was smooth, but as the aircraft climbed to cruising altitude, the tension in the cabin seemed to increase rather than dissipate. Inspector Morrison moved between the various security personnel positioned throughout the cabin, speaking in low tones and occasionally gesturing toward the sophisticated communication equipment that allowed the aircraft to maintain constant contact with ground-based security operations. Princess Charlotte, oblivious to the undercurrents of adult concern, had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, while Prince Louis entertained himself with a puzzle under his nanny's watchful eye. The innocent normalcy of the children's behavior provided a stark contrast to the alert vigilance of every adult on board. About 30 minutes into the flight, Morrison approached William with a concerned expression. "Sir, we're receiving some unusual communications. Nothing threatening, but definitely outside normal parameters. The caller claims to have information relevant to today's visit and insists on speaking directly with you." William's expression hardened. This was exactly the kind of situation that Protocol 7 was designed to address. "Source and verification?" he asked tersely. "Unknown source, sir. The communication is coming through encrypted channels that suggest some level of official access, but not through any recognized government frequency. Our technical team is working to trace the origin, but whoever this is, they have sophisticated equipment and knowledge of our communication protocols." Catherine looked up from Charlotte, who was still sleeping peacefully. "Should we be concerned about the children?" she asked quietly. "No immediate danger," Morrison assured her quickly. "This appears to be someone seeking attention or attempting to disrupt protocols rather than posing any physical threat. However, the very fact that they can access our communication frequencies is concerning from a security standpoint." William stood and moved toward the aircraft's communications center, a small but highly advanced section equipped with equipment that allowed secure contact with virtually any government agency or security service in the world. "Put the call through to my headset," he instructed the communications officer. "I want a full recording, and I want our technical team monitoring every aspect of this conversation." As William prepared to take the unexpected call, the aircraft continued its steady progress toward Scotland. Below, the English countryside passed by in a patchwork of green fields and small towns, completely unaware that thousands of feet above them, a situation was unfolding that would require the future king to make decisions that could impact royal protocol for years to come. The communications officer handed William a specialized headset and indicated that the connection was ready. "Your Royal Highness, the caller is standing by. Our monitoring equipment is active, and we have recording capability enabled." Isaroos. William took a deep breath, his years of training for unexpected situations taking over, as he prepared to address whatever challenge awaited him on the other end of that encrypted line. The next few minutes would determine whether this flight continued as a routine family trip to Scotland or became something far more significant in the annals of royal history. "This is Prince William," he said into the headset, his voice carrying the authority of his position while maintaining the careful neutrality that royal training had instilled in him. "I understand you have something to communicate." The response that came through the headset would change everything about the remainder of this flight, setting in motion a series of events that would test every aspect of royal security protocols and William's ability to command respect and obedience even at 30,000 feet above the ground. The voice that came through William's headset was crisp, professional, and carried an accent that suggested expensive education and years of experience in delicate negotiations. "Your Royal Highness, my name is Marcus Thornfield. I represent certain interests that have become concerned about the purpose of today's flight and its potential implications for ongoing diplomatic situations." William's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. The name meant nothing to him, but the confidence in the man's voice and his knowledge of royal flight schedules suggested connections at the highest levels of government or intelligence services. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm not in the habit of discussing royal itineraries with unknown callers, regardless of how they've obtained access to secure communication channels. Quote, I understand your caution, sir, and I apologize for the irregular approach. However, time is of the essence, and traditional diplomatic channels have proven insufficient for addressing the urgency of this situation." Thornfield paused, and William could hear the faint sound of papers rustling in the background. "Your meeting in Edinburgh today involves parties whose recent activities have raised significant concerns within certain government circles." Catherine watched her husband's face carefully, noting the subtle changes in his expression as the conversation continued. Years of marriage had taught her to recognize when William was shifting from surprised concern into the calculated alertness that came with his role as future monarch. She gently adjusted Charlotte's position and signaled to the nanny to keep Prince Louis occupied with his activities. Inspector Morrison moved closer, her own headset allowing her to monitor the conversation while simultaneously coordinating with ground-based security services. Her fingers moved quickly across a tablet, sending encrypted messages to various agencies while maintaining visual contact with everyone in the cabin. The situation was evolving rapidly, and she needed to ensure that all possible scenarios were covered. "Mr. Thornfield," William said, his tone becoming more formal, "if you have concerns about official royal business, there are proper channels for raising such matters. The fact that you're contacting us in this manner suggests that your concerns may not align with established government policy. On the contrary, Your Royal Highness, my concerns arise precisely because of established government policy and the potential for today's activities to inadvertently complicate sensitive ongoing operations." Thornfield's voice carried a note of urgency that seemed genuine. "Without going into details that shouldn't be discussed on any communication channel, regardless of encryption, I can tell you that your planned meeting includes an individual whose recent communications with foreign entities have attracted attention from our intelligence services." William felt a chill run down his spine. Today's schedule included a private meeting with several Scottish business leaders and cultural figures, part of an ongoing effort to strengthen ties between the royal family and Scottish institutions. If one of these individuals was under intelligence surveillance, it could create a diplomatic nightmare and potentially compromise the royal family's carefully maintained political neutrality. "Inspector Morrison," William said, temporarily muting his microphone, "I need you to contact Palace Security immediately and have them run a fresh security clearance on today's meeting list. Cross-reference with any current MI5 or MI6 operations." Morrison nodded and immediately began making the necessary calls, her voice barely audible as she spoke into her secure communication device. Meanwhile, the aircraft continued its steady progress towards Scotland, with Squadron Leader Mitchell maintaining regular contact with air traffic control while monitoring the unusual activity in the passenger cabin. William unmuted his microphone and addressed Thornfield again. "Assuming your concerns have merit, what exactly are you proposing? Royal schedules aren't typically adjusted based on anonymous communications, regardless of their apparent sophistication. I'm not suggesting you cancel your visit, sir, merely that you exercise additional caution regarding one specific individual on your meeting list. Dr. Robert Mackenzie, the cultural historian you're scheduled to meet privately this afternoon." Thornfield's tone became more serious. "Dr. T.C. Addison, Mackenzie has recently been in communication with parties whose interests may not align with those of the Crown or the British government." William's mind raced as he processed this information. Dr. Mackenzie was a respected academic whose family had served Scottish cultural institutions for generations. The meeting had been arranged months in advance as part of William's ongoing efforts to engage with Scottish intellectual and cultural leaders. The idea that such a figure might be involved in questionable activities seemed almost impossible to believe. "Inspector Morrison," William called quietly, "add Dr. Robert Mackenzie to that security review. I want everything we can get on his recent activities, communications, and associations." Morrison's expression grew more concerned as she relayed this additional request. The fact that a specific name had been mentioned elevated the situation significantly. Within minutes, she was receiving preliminary information that confirmed some of Thornfield's implications. Her tablet displayed a series of red flags that suggested Dr. Mackenzie had indeed been in contact with individuals of interest to British intelligence services. Catherine watched the exchange with growing concern. While she couldn't hear the details of the conversation, the increasing tension among the security personnel and her husband's increasingly formal demeanor told her that this was far more serious than an administrative mix-up or scheduling conflict. She quietly moved Charlotte to a more comfortable position and caught the nanny's eye, signaling her to be prepared for potential changes to their plans. "Thornfield," William continued, "assuming your information is accurate, what specifically do you believe Dr. Mackenzie's intentions might be regarding today's meeting?" "That's difficult to say with certainty, Your Royal Highness. However, his recent communications suggest he may be planning to use his meeting with you to gather information or make requests that could put you in a compromising position. Nothing treasonous or directly threatening, but potentially embarrassing or diplomatically problematic." The implications of this were staggering. If a respected Scottish cultural figure was planning to use a private meeting with the future king for unauthorized purposes, it could create a scandal that would dominate headlines for weeks and potentially damage the royal family's relationship with Scottish institutions. The political ramifications alone could be severe, particularly given the ongoing delicate balance of relationships within the United Kingdom. Inspector Morrison approached William with updated information on her tablet. "Sir, preliminary intelligence confirms that Dr. Mackenzie has been in contact with several foreign cultural organizations that have previously been flagged for potential intelligence-gathering activities. Nothing definitively criminal, but certainly outside the scope of normal academic collaboration." William felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. This was exactly the kind of situation that required immediate decision-making without the luxury of consulting advisors or following predetermined protocols. The safety and reputation of his family, and by extension the crown itself, depended on how he handled the next few minutes. "Mr. Thornfield, I appreciate your bringing this matter to our attention, though I reserve judgment on your methods. What would you recommend as an appropriate response?" "Cancel the private meeting with Dr. Mackenzie, sir. Maintain all other scheduled activities, but ensure that any interaction with him occurs only in group settings, where conversation can be properly monitored and controlled." Thornfield paused. "And, Your Royal Highness, I would strongly recommend that this entire matter be handled discreetly. Dr. Mackenzie may not be aware that his communications have been monitored, and a heavy-handed response could create exactly the kind of attention that serves no one's interests." William looked around the cabin at his family, his security team, and the aircraft crew, all of whom were depending on him to make the right decision. The responsibility was enormous, but it was also precisely what his entire life had prepared him for. "Inspector Morrison, implement Protocol 7 modifications immediately. I want Dr. Mackenzie's private meeting canceled and restructured as a group session with at least 3 other participants. Make it appear like a scheduling adjustment, not a security concern." Morrison nodded and immediately began making the necessary arrangements. Her experience with delicate situations allowed her to craft explanations that would satisfy Dr. Mackenzie's office while ensuring that the security concerns were properly addressed. Within minutes, she had coordinated with the palace staff in Edinburgh to restructure the afternoon schedule in a way that would appear completely natural. "Additionally," William continued, "I want a full security review of all future private meetings for the next 6 months. If this situation exists with Dr. Mackenzie, it may exist elsewhere as well." As these arrangements were being made, Prince George looked up from his book again, his young face showing curiosity about the unusual level of adult activity around him. "Dad, why is everyone so busy? Are we going to a different place?" William smiled at his son, managing to project calm despite the complexity of the situation developing around them. "No, George, we're still going to Scotland as planned. Sometimes grown-up schedules need to be adjusted, and everyone is just making sure everything goes smoothly." He reached over to ruffle his son's hair again, the simple gesture helping to ground him in the reality of what he was ultimately protecting. The aircraft began its initial descent toward Edinburgh, and Squadron Leader Mitchell announced over the intercom that they would be landing in approximately 30 minutes. William realized that by the time they touched down, he would need to have made decisions that could affect royal security protocols for years to come. The conversation with Thornfield had opened a window into security vulnerabilities that went far beyond a single questionable meeting. "Mr. Thornfield," William said into his headset, "before we conclude this conversation, I need to know how you'll be monitoring the effectiveness of these adjustments, and whether we can expect future communications through these irregular channels." "This will be our only direct communication unless circumstances become dire, Your Royal Highness. However, your security services will be provided with detailed briefings on this matter through proper channels within the next 48 hours. Thornfield's voice carried a note of finality. "I trust that today's adjustments will prevent any unfortunate incidents, and I apologize again for the unorthodox approach to raising these concerns." The connection ended, leaving William with a headset full of static and a cabin full of people looking to him for direction. The next phase of this crisis would require him to exercise the kind of authority that few people ever had to wield, making decisions that could have consequences far beyond the confines of this aircraft. As the aircraft descended through the clouds toward Edinburgh Airport, William removed his headset and turned to address Inspector Morrison directly. The weight of command had settled fully on his shoulders now, and every person in the cabin could sense the shift in his demeanor. This was no longer a routine royal visit. It had become a test of his ability to protect his family and the institution he represented. "Inspector, I need immediate implementation of enhanced security protocols for today's visit. Every person we encounter, every venue we visit, and every interaction we have needs to be reassessed in light of this new intelligence." William's voice carried an authority that came naturally but had been honed through years of preparation for exactly these kinds of moments. "I also want a complete communications blackout regarding the specifics of what we've just learned. Information sharing should be limited to essential security personnel only." Morrison nodded, her fingers already moving across multiple devices as she coordinated with ground-based security teams. "Sir, I'm implementing Code Orange procedures immediately. This will mean additional personnel at every location, modified routes between venues, and enhanced screening for all individuals scheduled to interact with the royal party." She paused, checking incoming messages on her secure device. "I'm also receiving confirmation that Dr. Mackenzie's schedule adjustment has been accepted without question. His office believes it's simply to accommodate additional cultural leaders in the discussion." Catherine looked up from Charlotte, who had awakened during the descent and was now looking out the window with excitement at the approaching Scottish landscape. "Will this affect the children's activities?" she asked quietly. "They've been looking forward to this trip for weeks, and I'd rather not disappoint them if we can avoid it. The children's schedule remains unchanged for now," William assured her. "The security concerns are focused on my meetings with adult officials and cultural figures. Their visit to the Children's Museum and the castle should proceed normally, though with enhanced security presence." He paused, watching as Prince Louis pressed his face against the aircraft window. "However, we need to be prepared for potential schedule modifications if the situation evolves." Squadron Leader Mitchell's voice came over the intercom, professional and calm despite the unusual activity he'd observed in the cabin. "Your Royal Highness, we're beginning our final approach to Edinburgh. Ground conditions are excellent, and we should have a smooth landing in approximately 12 minutes. I've been informed that there will be some modifications to our ground transportation arrangements upon arrival." William acknowledged the captain's announcement before turning back to Morrison. "What kind of modifications?" "Additional security vehicles, sir, and alternative routes to our first destination. The advance team has also arranged for decoy vehicles to ensure that any potential surveillance of our movements will be complicated." Morrison's earpiece crackled with incoming communications, and she listened intently before continuing. "I'm also receiving reports that increased media presence has been noted near several of our scheduled venues. Nothing unusual for a royal visit, but we're monitoring to ensure it remains within normal parameters. As the aircraft touched down with barely a bump, William felt the familiar mix of relief and renewed tension that came with transitioning from the controlled environment of air travel to the unpredictable variables of ground-based activities. The next few hours would test every aspect of the security protocols that had been developed over decades of royal travel, and he knew that his decisions during this crisis would likely influence those protocols for years to come. Prince George unbuckled his seatbelt as soon as the aircraft came to a complete stop, his excitement about visiting Scotland temporarily overriding his usual careful adherence to rules. "Can we see the castle today, Dad? And will there really be Highland Games?" William smiled at his son's enthusiasm, finding comfort in the normalcy of childhood excitement amid the complexity of adult concerns. "Yes, George. We'll see the castle this afternoon, and there will be demonstrations of traditional Scottish games. Just remember to stay close to your protection officers and follow all their instructions carefully." As the aircraft door opened and the stairs were positioned, William could see the enhanced security presence that Morrison had arranged. What would normally be a modest welcome party had been expanded to include additional police officers, plainclothes security personnel, and multiple black vehicles arranged in formations designed to provide maximum protection and flexibility. The sight was both reassuring and sobering, a visible reminder of how quickly circumstances could change. Inspector Morrison conducted a final briefing with the security team before disembarkation. "Remember, we're operating under Code Orange protocols with specific intelligence regarding potential complications during private meetings. Every interaction needs to be monitored, every venue secured beyond normal parameters, and any anomalous behavior reported immediately." She glanced toward William, who nodded his approval of these instructions. The walk from the aircraft to the waiting vehicles passed without incident, though William noticed the increased number of security personnel positioned around the airport perimeter. The media presence was indeed heavier than usual for a family visit, with photographers and television crews positioned at multiple vantage points to capture their arrival. Catherine waved politely while maintaining protective positions near the children, her experience allowing her to project warmth while remaining alert to her surroundings. Once secured in the lead vehicle, William activated the secure communication system that connected him directly to Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and the Scottish Government offices. "This is Prince William, reporting arrival in Edinburgh with enhanced security protocols in effect due to developing intelligence concerns. All parties should be aware that today's activities may require real-time modifications based on ongoing assessment of potential security issues." The voice that responded belonged to Sir Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary, whose calm professionalism had guided royal operations through numerous crises over the years. "Your Royal Highness, we've been briefed on the general nature of your concerns, though not the specifics. What level of support do you require from Palace resources? For now, maintain normal operations, but be prepared to provide additional diplomatic cover if today's activities result in any political complications," William replied. "The situation involves potential intelligence concerns regarding individuals scheduled for private meetings, and we've implemented preventive measures that should contain any issues. However, I want all relevant parties prepared for potential media inquiries if our security adjustments attract attention." As the convoy moved through Edinburgh streets toward their first destination, William noticed the careful positioning of additional security vehicles at key intersections, and the presence of plainclothes officers among the pedestrians. The level of coordination required to implement these enhanced protections on such short notice was impressive, and reminded him of the enormous resources dedicated to royal security operations. Catherine entertained the children by pointing out historic landmarks and discussing the day's planned activities, her ability to maintain normalcy serving as an anchor for the family's stability, even as adult concerns swirled around them. Princess Charlotte had become fascinated by the Scottish flags flying from various buildings, while Prince Louis was more interested in the police motorcycles that flanked their convoy. The first venue was a cultural center, where William was scheduled to meet with representatives of various Scottish institutions. As the convoy approached the building, Morrison's voice came through the communication system. "Sir, preliminary sweeps have identified no immediate concerns, but we've noted increased pedestrian traffic in the surrounding area. Nothing that suggests coordinated surveillance, but we're maintaining enhanced vigilance." William stepped out of the vehicle into the crisp Scottish air, immediately surrounded by the protective bubble that his security team had perfected over years of practice. The welcoming committee included local officials, cultural leaders, and representatives of the organizations he was scheduled to meet with throughout the day. Notably absent was Dr. Mackenzie, whose individual meeting had been successfully converted into a group session scheduled for later in the afternoon. As William moved through the carefully choreographed greetings and introductions, his mind remained focused on the delicate balance between fulfilling his royal duties and protecting his family from the potential consequences of the intelligence concerns that had emerged during the flight. Every handshake, every conversation, every smile had to be evaluated not just for its diplomatic value, but for its security implications. The morning's events proceeded smoothly, with discussions focusing on Scottish cultural preservation, educational initiatives, and economic development projects that aligned with royal charitable interests. William found himself impressed by the passion and expertise of the individuals he met, while simultaneously remaining alert for any signs of the kind of inappropriate behavior or questionable motives that the mysterious Mr. Thornfield had warned about. During a brief private moment between scheduled meetings, William received an update from Morrison that changed everything about his understanding of the day's events. "Sir, we've received additional intelligence that suggests the concerns raised during our flight were part of a larger operation to test royal security protocols. Dr. Mackenzie appears to have been unknowingly used as a means of assessing how quickly and effectively the royal protection system could respond to potential threats." The implications of this revelation were staggering. If the morning's crisis had been an orchestrated test of royal security capabilities, it meant that unknown parties had sophisticated knowledge of royal communication systems, flight schedules, and security protocols. It also meant that William's response to the crisis was being evaluated by people whose motives and loyalties remained completely unclear. "Inspector, I need you to coordinate immediately with MI5 and ensure that every aspect of today's communications and security adjustments are documented and analyzed," William instructed. "If this was indeed a test of our systems, then we need to understand what weaknesses may have been exposed and what information may have been gathered about our operational capabilities." As the afternoon progressed and the time approached for the restructured meeting that would include Dr. Mackenzie, William realized that the true test of his leadership was just beginning. The decisions he made in the next few hours would determine not only the immediate safety of his family, but potentially the future effectiveness of royal security operations for generations to come.